I'm posting this here because I genuinely don't know if I'm losing my mind, or if I've been the dumbest man alive for the last 2 years. I'm 35. My wife is 33. We've been together for 9 years, married for 6, and we have a 4-year-old daughter. If you asked anyone in our lives what kind of couple we were, they'd probably say stable. Not flashy, not overly romantic, not the kind of people constantly posting about each other online. Just normal. We had routines. We had inside jokes. We had a kid, a mortgage, 2 cars, and the kind of life people call boring when they're young and pray for when they're older. I work in operations for a regional shipping company. The job is dull, but it pays well. My wife, Emma, works in marketing for a private dental group. She's smart, organized, outgoing in ways I've never been. She remembers birthdays, sends thank you cards, and somehow manages to look put together even when she says she feels like a mess. For most of our marriage, I thought I got lucky. And maybe that's what makes this worse. When I look back now, I can trace the whole thing to one stupid object. Not lipstick on a collar. Not hotel receipts. Not finding explicit texts. A charger. About 7 months ago, I came home from work and found a phone charger plugged into the outlet by our bed. It wasn't mine. It wasn't hers either, or at least that's what I thought at first. It was one of those older fast chargers with a white block and a black cable wrapped around it with one of those little Velcro ties. Weirdly neat. Weirdly specific. I noticed it because I'm obsessive about cables. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I hate clutter, and chargers multiply in a house like rabbits. We usually keep ours in the kitchen drawer. Seeing one set up by the bed made me stop. Emma was in the bathroom washing her face. I held up the charger and asked, "What's this?" She looked at it in the mirror and said, "No idea." I said, "It was plugged in on your side." She shrugged. "Maybe your sister left it when she visited." That didn't make much sense, because my sister hadn't been over in nearly 3 weeks, and she uses an iPhone charger, not that model. But the explanation was casual enough that I let it go. I tossed it in the junk drawer in the kitchen and forgot about it. Or at least I tried to. 2 days later, it was back by the bed. Same charger. Same cable tie. Same outlet. This time I knew for a fact I hadn't put it there. So I asked again. Emma laughed like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "It's a charger," she said. "Why are you interrogating me like it's evidence in a murder case?" I remember that line because, in hindsight, it makes me sick. I said, "Because you said you didn't know what it was." And she said, "I don't. Maybe it's yours and you forgot." That annoyed me more than it should have. I'm not forgetful about stuff like that. Also, I knew it wasn't mine because I use a completely different brand for everything. I buy the same chargers every time because I'm boring and loyal to whatever works. But I didn't push it. That was the pattern that would define the next several months of my life. Notice something, ask about it, get a weird answer, tell myself I'm overthinking, move on. A week after the charger thing, Emma started going to the gym again. That by itself wouldn't have been suspicious. She used to go regularly before our daughter was born. But she'd always hated evening workouts. Said the gym was too crowded after 6 p.m. and that she preferred mornings. Suddenly, she was going 3, sometimes 4 nights a week after dinner. She bought new leggings, new sports bras, expensive shampoo, and one of those giant water bottles with the time markers on the side. Again, totally normal things. Healthy things. Good things. Except she didn't seem happier. She seemed sharpened. Like someone preparing for inspection. She started putting her phone face down all the time. She changed the passcode. Not in a dramatic way, just casually, the way someone might update a password because they got a security alert. But when I asked what it was because mine had died and I wanted to use her phone to order our daughter a replacement lunchbox, she said, "Just tell me what you need, and I'll do it." That was unusual. Not because we had some open phone policy. We didn't. We just never had to think about it before. Then came the jokes. I don't know how to explain this part except to say that when someone is lying to you for long enough, your body starts picking up signals before your brain is willing to name them. Emma started making little comments that made me feel like I was standing half an inch outside my own life. Things like, "You've been in a weird mood lately. Are you okay? You seem paranoid. You're not still stuck on that charger thing, are you? You know not everything is a clue, right?" Always playful. Always smiling. Always framed like she was helping me not take life so seriously. It worked for a while. I started feeling embarrassed by my own instincts. Then one Friday, our daughter had a fever, so I stayed home from work. Emma left around 8:15 a.m. like usual. Around noon, I realized I'd left my laptop charger in our bedroom and went upstairs while my daughter was asleep on the couch. Emma's iPad was on her nightstand. The screen lit up when I picked up my laptop bag, and I saw a notification banner. Not a message preview. Just a contact name, Ryan. Under it, one line. Last night was then it disappeared because the screen locked. I stood there staring at my wife's iPad like it had spoken. I knew a few Ryans. One was her coworker. One was the husband of her friend Claire. One was a guy from our neighborhood Facebook group who helped organize the annual block party. It could have been anyone. And still, I knew. I can't explain how. I just knew. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the laptop. I wish I could say I handled what happened next with dignity. I didn't. I picked up the iPad and tried every passcode I could think of. Our anniversary, our daughter's birthday, Emma's birthday, the last 4 digits of her number, a couple of combinations she'd used for old streaming accounts. Nothing. I put it down exactly where it had been and spent the next hour sitting on the living room floor while cartoons played in the background and my daughter slept under a blanket. I kept hearing that half message in my head. Last night was what? Fun. Crazy. Worth it? A mistake. I miss you already. You can torture yourself forever with an unfinished sentence. That evening, I watched Emma move through the kitchen making pasta like she always did on Fridays. At one point she smiled at me and said, "You look tired." I almost laughed. Instead I said, "Long day." She kissed my cheek. I remember the exact sensation of that kiss because it was the first time in my life I felt physically repulsed by someone I loved. Not because I had proof. Because some part of me had already accepted what the rest of me was too scared to say. For the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't like. I started tracking patterns. Gym nights. Late meetings. Girls' dinners. Quick trips to Target that took 90 minutes. Shower as soon as she got home. Phone always with her. Even to take the trash out. I checked our bank statements. Nothing obvious. No hotels. No suspicious restaurant bills. No weird Venmo payments. I checked the cell phone account. Mostly normal. But there was one number that repeated far more than it should have, especially during work hours and after 10 p.m. I looked it up. It was registered to a small construction company one town over. The owner's name was Ryan Mercer. That made my stomach drop. Ryan Mercer was not a stranger. He was one of the dads from our daughter's preschool. Not a close friend, but close enough. We'd stood next to each other at birthday parties. We'd both volunteered at the spring fundraiser. He'd been to our house once for a barbecue. His wife, Natalie, was quiet but kind. They had a son in the same class as our daughter. I sat there at the kitchen table staring at the number like maybe if I looked long enough, it would turn into someone else's. It didn't. What messed me up most wasn't just that she might be cheating. It was the geometry of it. The school pickup line. The bake sales. The parent emails. The tiny little world of children and juice boxes and shared calendars. She hadn't gone somewhere far away to destroy our life. She had done it inside the life itself. The next piece fell into place in a way that now feels almost insulting. Remember the charger? A few days later, Ryan came up in conversation by accident. Emma was talking about the preschool fundraiser and said, Ryan said they might do the raffle earlier this year. I asked, as evenly as I could, Ryan Mercer. She looked at me for a split second too long before saying, yeah, who else? Then she turned back to rinsing strawberries. I said, didn't know you talked to him much. She shrugged. Parent stuff. Group chat things. Why? I said, no reason. Then I went into the junk drawer. The charger was gone. I didn't say anything. That night, after she fell asleep, I searched the house. I know how that sounds. Desperate. Invasive. Pathetic. It was all of those things. I checked her car first. Nothing in the open, but in the center console under a stack of napkins, I found a crumpled receipt from a bar downtown. 2 old fashions. 1 espresso martini. Truffle fries. Paid at 11:48 p.m. on a Thursday. She had told me she was staying late to finish quarter-end reporting. Emma doesn't drink old fashions. I do. Ryan does. How do I know that? Because at the barbecue at our house, he'd spent 10 minutes talking about bourbon like it was a religion. That should have been enough. It wasn't. Because when your life is about to split in half, your brain becomes obsessed with certainty. Not 90%. Not likely. Not obvious. Certainty. So I waited. I know some people reading this will think that if I really believed she was cheating, I should have confronted her immediately. Maybe. But I needed to know how deep it went. I needed to know if this was emotional, physical, recent, ongoing. I needed to know if my daughter was about to lose her home because of something reckless and temporary, or because I had been living with a stranger for years. The answer came on a Tuesday. Emma texted me around 5:20 p.m. Running late. Claire had a rough day, grabbing wine with her. I replied, okay. Then I called Claire's husband. Not because I had planned some genius move. Because I was shaking and needed to either confirm I was insane or confirm I wasn't. He answered on the second ring. I made some excuse about borrowing a ladder this weekend, then said, is Claire okay? Emma said she had a rough day. Silence. Then he said, Claire's with her sister in Columbus. Left this morning. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in my car with the engine off for what must have been 15 minutes. There are moments in your life when the fantasy dies all at once. Not the marriage. Not the relationship. The fantasy that the person you loved would stop short of making you feel stupid. That was the moment for me. I opened Find My on the family app we use mostly for safety and logistics. Emma's location was on. She was at a Marriott on the edge of downtown. I drove there. Even writing that makes me feel sick, because I know how cinematic it sounds. Like I'm turning my own humiliation into a scene. But it happened exactly like that. I parked across the street and watched the entrance. At 6:03 p.m., Ryan walked out of the hotel lobby with his phone to his ear. At 6:06, Emma came out behind him. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't sneaking. She wasn't looking guilty. She looked comfortable. That somehow hurt more than if she'd looked scared. Ryan touched the small of her back as they walked toward the parking lot. The kind of touch people do when they've done it 100 times. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't confront them in the lot. I didn't scream. I took photos. Then I drove home and made mac and cheese for my daughter. That last sentence is the truest thing I've ever written. The world can end at 6:06 p.m. and by 6:40 you still have to cut strawberries into halves because your kid likes them that way. Emma got home at 8:14. She came in carrying a bottle of wine and said, "Claire says hi." I looked at her and realized I would never again see her the way I had that morning. I said, "How was the Marriott?" The bottle slipped out of her hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. That image will live in my head forever. Red wine spreading through white tile. My daughter asleep upstairs. My wife staring at me like she'd been shot. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she said, very quietly, "Can we not do this here?" That sentence told me everything. Not "what are you talking about?" Not "you're crazy." Not even "it's not what you think." Just logistics. I said, "How long?" She sat down at the kitchen table. I stayed standing because if I sat, I thought I might actually collapse. She covered her face with both hands and said, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I remember saying, "That's not an answer." Then she said it. 8 months. 8 months. Almost the exact length of time since I'd first found the charger. I laughed, but not because anything was funny. It was the kind of laugh your body makes when reality becomes too sharp to hold. I asked if Ryan's wife knew. She said no. I asked how it started. She said after the fundraiser planning committee started meeting more often, they began texting, then getting coffee, then complaining about their marriages, then one night after too much wine they kissed in his truck. I asked if she had ever been in our house with him when I wasn't there. She said no. I asked if he had ever been in our bed. She said no. I asked if I was supposed to believe that. She didn't answer. Then came the part that broke something in me permanently. She started crying and said, "I didn't mean to hurt you." I know people say that all the time in situations like this. Maybe sometimes they even believe it. But there is something indescribably brutal about hearing "I didn't mean to hurt you" from a person who had to lie, plan, erase, invent, and perform over and over again in order to hurt you this thoroughly. I asked if she loved him. She said, "I don't know." Which I think is coward code for yes, but not enough to admit it out loud. I asked if she wanted to leave. She said, "I don't want to blow up our family." Again. Logistics. Not remorse. Damage control. I slept in the guest room that night and barely slept at all. At 2 a.m., I heard her outside the door crying. At 3 a.m., I heard her send what I assume were voice messages in the bathroom. At 5 a.m., I got up, opened my laptop, and called a divorce attorney as soon as the office opened. What happened next is where it gets uglier. The lawyer told me the same thing every cheated-on spouse apparently gets told. Do not leave the house, document everything, do not destroy evidence, do not let emotion make financial decisions, and if there are children involved, start thinking 3 moves ahead. So that's what I did. I copied the phone records. The bar receipt. The hotel photos. Screenshots of her location history. A timeline of lies I could verify. Then I did something I'm still not sure was right. I reached out to Ryan's wife, Natalie. Not dramatically. Not vindicatively. I asked if we could meet privately because I had information that affected her family. She replied an hour later. Is this about Ryan and Emma? I stared at that message for a full minute. When we met at a coffee shop, she looked exhausted in a way that made me realize I was not the first person to enter this nightmare. She already knew, sort of. She had found flirty messages 3 months earlier. Ryan had convinced her it was emotional and over. He cried, apologized, swore it was a wake-up call, offered therapy, deleted apps, shared passwords. Apparently he did what a lot of cheaters do. Confessed just enough to survive. I showed her the hotel photos. She closed her eyes and just nodded once. No shock. Just confirmation. Then she said something that still haunts me. I think they like watching us help them hide it. I told her I didn't think Emma was that cruel. Natalie said, then you still don't understand her. That sentence made me angrier than anything else anyone said during this entire ordeal. Because I wanted to defend my wife. Even then. Even with the evidence in my phone and the lawyer's card in my wallet. That's what betrayal does. It humiliates you and then dares you to protect the person humiliating you. The next few weeks were a blur of controlled destruction. Emma begged me not to tell our families yet. Said we should figure out what this is before turning it into public fallout. I told her there was nothing to figure out. She said she would end it with Ryan. I said she should have ended it before involving hotels and lies and preschool pickup lines. She cried. She apologized. She said she had been lonely. She said we had become roommates. She said motherhood changed her. She said she felt invisible. She said Ryan made her feel seen. I'm sure some of that was even true. But the thing no one tells you is that explanations feel insulting when they arrive only after the mask is gone. If you were lonely, say lonely. If you were drowning, say drowning. If you wanted out, say out. Don't build a second life and call the collapse communication. Eventually, both families found out. Her mother cried and asked me to reconsider for our daughter's sake. My brother nearly drove to Ryan's house before I stopped him. Emma's father, who has always been calm to the point of eerie, looked at her across our dining room table and said, "You have no idea what you've done." He wasn't talking about the affair. He was talking about identity. Because once the truth is out, everyone realizes the same thing at once. The person they thought they knew either no longer exists, or never did. The part I'm struggling with now, and the reason I'm writing this, is not whether divorce is the right call. It is. I know that. The part I'm struggling with is that Emma has shifted, in the last month, from apologetic to revisionist. Now she says our marriage had been broken for years. That I was emotionally unavailable. That she tried to tell me. That Ryan just happened during a vulnerable period. That cheating was wrong, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. And listen, I'm not claiming I was a perfect husband. I worked long hours. I got complacent. I was tired more often than I was present. I let routine replace effort. But there is a huge moral difference between being imperfect in a marriage and secretly building intimacy with another person while your spouse is home folding your kids' laundry. What really pushed me over the edge happened 4 days ago. Our daughter had a preschool art show. One of those chaotic little events where every paper plate turkey and handprint rainbow gets treated like museum work. Emma and I agreed to be civil and attend together. Ryan and Natalie were there too. I saw him across the room near the juice table, holding a tiny cup and talking to another parent like he was just another dad on a Thursday evening. I had expected rage. What I felt was something colder. Recognition. This man had eaten burgers on my patio. He had shaken my hand. He had probably looked me in the eye on days he had slept with my wife. At one point our daughter ran up to Emma holding a painting, and Emma crouched down, smiling, tucking her hair behind her ear, saying, "That's beautiful, baby." And I suddenly had this disorienting moment where the old Emma and the real Emma occupied the same body. The mother of my child. The woman from the Marriott. The person who packed lunch snacks. The person who lied about Claire. The voice that used to calm me down. The mouth that kissed me after kissing someone else. How are you supposed to metabolize that? After the art show, Emma asked if we could talk in the driveway once our daughter was inside with my sister. She said she knows I think she's a monster. She said she knows she destroyed everything. Then she told me Ryan wants to leave Natalie and be honest now. I actually laughed in her face. Be honest now. After months of lies. After hotel rooms. After using two families as camouflage. After making fools of everyone around them. She said she doesn't know what she wants. That part of her thinks she and Ryan were holding on to something unreal. That part of her thinks she owes it to herself to explore whether the connection is real. That part of her wants to repair the damage she caused and come home. Come home. As if home is a place you can set on fire and still move back into before the smoke clears. I told her I'm filing. She cried again, but not in the same way as before. This time there was anger in it. A kind of panicked grief that felt less like sorrow over what she'd done and more like horror that consequences had finally become real. She said, "So that's it? 9 years and you won't even try?" I said, "You already used our try on someone else." She slapped the side of my car hard enough to make my daughter look out the front window. Then she immediately started apologizing, saying she didn't mean it, saying she's falling apart. Maybe she is. But I've realized something ugly about betrayal. Once someone proves they can protect their own feelings at the expense of your reality, every later emotion they show becomes impossible to trust. So now I'm here. Sleeping in the guest room in the house I'm fighting to keep stable for my daughter. Talking to lawyers. Trading calendars. Pretending to be functional at work. Getting texts from Emma that range from "I'm so sorry" to "You're refusing to see how we got here." Watching someone I loved rewrite our history in real time so she can survive what she's done. And the stupidest part of all. I still think about the charger. That dumb white charging block with the black cable and the neat little Velcro tie. Because I'm almost certain it was Ryan's. I think he left it here one afternoon when our daughter and I were at my parents' house. I think Emma found it before I did. I think she panicked. I think when I asked about it, she looked right at me and lied without missing a beat. That was probably the first true moment of my marriage ending. Not the hotel. Not the confession. Not the lawyer. Not even the divorce papers. A charger. An ordinary object that didn't belong in my house, and a woman I trusted telling me she'd never seen it before. If you've read this far, I guess my question is: how do you stop replaying the version of your life that turned out to be fake? Because I can handle anger. I can handle custody schedules. I can handle selling the house if I have to. I can even handle being alone. What I don't know how to handle is the daily realization that while I was inside my marriage, she was standing just outside it, holding the door open for someone else. Ruction of events.